The desert sun scorched the earth as the billionaire sheikh stood at the edge of his sprawling palace terrace, his piercing eyes betraying no emotion. Yet beneath his cold facade, a storm raged, an unexpected fire burning within, fueled by a gaze that had dared to pierce his armor. Tonight, as shadows stretched long over the golden dunes, his world was about to unravel. The vast emirate, swathed in ancient tradition and shimmering opulence, lay beneath him like a jewel forged in sand and sun. The palace gleamed with marble pillars veined in gold, silks fluttered in the warm breeze, and the scent of incense wove through the air, mingling with whispers of power and secrets. Beyond the palace walls, the desert stretched, endless and merciless, mirroring the ruthless strength of its ruler. Yet, no grandeur could prepare him for the sight of the landowner's daughter. Her silhouette carved against the horizon, every gesture brimming with fierce authenticity. She was unlike anyone he had encountered, her spirit untamed as the desert winds, her eyes burning with a fire that challenged his every command. She belonged to a world far removed from his own, grounded in earth and toil rather than wealth and dominion. Still, that very difference sparked a reluctant fascination in the heart he had sworn to guard against vulnerability. He recalled the first moment their paths crossed. A market square alive with the chatter of traders and the dusty scent of fresh earth. She bartered fiercely, her voice steady, her pride apparent to all. There was no trace of deference in her posture, no fear of his imposing presence. Instead, she met his gaze with a stubborn defiance that both infuriated and intrigued him. Behind her confidence lurked a secret he could sense but could not yet grasp, a shadow tethered to her family's past, whispering of betrayals long buried. Their first conversation crackled with tension. "You don't belong here," he had said, his voice low, edged with command. "And yet I'm the one standing while you watch from your gilded cage," she shot back, eyes flashing. That exchange, sharp and electric, stirred something long dormant, a fragile thread of connection woven through their starkly different worlds. He was the unyielding sheikh, master of kingdoms and gold. She was the unbreakable daughter of the soil, fierce and unbowed. Between them, a silent battle of wills began, fueled by attraction wrapped in defiance. But the fragile dawn of their bond shattered when he stumbled upon a letter hidden deep within the ancient scrolls of his private library, a letter that bore the seal of her family and the mark of a name entwined with his own lineage. The words spoke of debts unpaid and sins concealed, a revelation that threatened to tear asunder the delicate thread they'd begun to weave. Heart pounding, the billionaire sheikh stared at the faded ink, frozen in a maelstrom of disbelief and fury. Could the woman he was drawn to harbor ties so dark and impossible? This discovery was more than a secret. It was a fracture in the foundation of his empire, and of the trust he had barely begun to place in her. Before this desert's deepest secrets could be unearthed, join us in following this tale of passion and peril. And before the next secret of this vast emirate is unraveled, make sure you're already part of our caravan of stories. Many destinies still await, and I don't want you to miss a single moment. Like if the heart of this billionaire sheikh has already captured your curiosity. Tell me in the comments, from which city are you following this saga, and what twist do you think is coming next? Your passion for these dramas is what inspires us to continue. Thank you for being with us. The soft rustle of silk echoed as the billionaire sheikh closed the ancient scroll, his fingers trembling ever so slightly, an almost imperceptible crack in the armor he so meticulously crafted. The letters' faded ink burned into his mind, each word a shard of ice in his chest. Debts, betrayals, a shadow stretching unnervingly close to his own bloodline. How could she, fierce and untamed as the desert winds, harbor ties so forbidden? The very thought scorched him deeper than the blazing sun outside. He had stood on the palace terrace mere moments ago, gazing over his vast emirate, world drenched in the fading amber light. A ruler to all, yet captive to the storm boiling within his heart. The scent of jasmine and oud drifted faintly through the corridors. But tonight, those fragrances did little to soothe. His mind swirled with the memory of her stubborn eyes that had dared challenge him amidst the cacophony of the market square. Her voice had been unwavering, a melody of defiance that echoed long after their parting. He had summoned her here, to the heart of his domain, beneath chandeliers dripping with crystal light, and shadows that played tricks on the marble floors. When she stepped into the grand hall, the world seemed to pause. The silk of her dress whispered as she moved, a stark contrast to the weight of gold and power pressing against every inch of his palace. "Why did you come?" His voice was low, edged with accusation and something softer, a desperation he fought to conceal. Her gaze lifted, unfaltering. "Because you summoned me, Sheikh," she replied, her tone steady, yet laced with a flicker of wary curiosity. He studied the set of her jaw, the quiet strength that belied her modest origins. In her presence, the opulence of his realm felt oddly hollow. His anger wrestled with the reluctant pull of admiration. "You have secrets," he said, stepping closer, each movement deliberate, commanding. "Secrets that threaten everything." She met his step, never backing down. "And you hide behind walls and riches, afraid to face whatever past tries to reach you." A flicker of vulnerability glimmered behind his dark eyes, a brief unraveling before the customary mask of the unyielding sheikh settled back. "I protect my people, my legacy." "And what of your heart?" she challenged, voice barely above a whisper. "What do you protect there?" Silence hung heavy. Between them, the air thickened, charged with a tumult of emotions neither dared name. She was no ordinary woman. Her fire unsettled him, smoldering beneath the polished veneer of his control. He recalled the hidden letter again, words that whispered of unpaid debts that stretched like cracks beneath his foundation. A family betrayal, not yet unearthed, a wound carefully concealed behind grandeur and politics. The realization twisted inside him, bitter and relentless. "I do not know if I can trust you," he confessed, a hard edge softening ever so slightly. "And yet here I stand," she said, stepping forward until the space between them felt electric with possibility and peril. They sat across from each other in the dimly lit room, shadows of gilded arches casting long shapes. The palace, a kingdom of marble and gold, suddenly felt like a cage, both their prison and their battleground. Outside, the desert stretched endless and unforgiving. Inside, a war raged of pride, passion, and perilous secrets. Her story unfolded bit by bit, tales of hardship and resilience, of a family shackled by choices made long ago. Her voice trembled once, but her gaze never wavered when she revealed the cost of loyalty and the price of silence. He saw her not as a subject to be commanded, but as a fierce flame that dared to challenge the desert's cruelty and his own icy heart. But even as walls fell between them, shadows lurked. There were whispers in the palace, murmurs from courtiers, sharpened by jealousy and ambition. His closest confidants eyed her presence with thinly veiled suspicion. "You defy the rules," one advisor hissed, voice low but venomous. "A daughter of landowners can never be more than a pawn in palace games. You risk everything." The sheikh's jaw clenched, the warning striking a nerve. His realm demanded loyalty, obedience, a perfect facade of order beneath the glittering surface. Yet this woman unsettled him, not simply because of her family's shadow, but because she stirred in him a longing he had long buried beneath the weight of duty. That night, beneath the vast dome of stars, he retreated to his private chambers. The silence was a fragile veil over the chaotic storm within. He traced the lines of the letter, marked not just by ink, but by bitter betrayal, and understood the impossible choice ahead. To embrace this woman was to invite the unraveling of carefully spun legacies. But to reject her meant breaking the fragile hope that perhaps he could reclaim a part of himself lost to power and pain. The grand palace doors watched silently as he paced, the echoes of his footsteps the only confession of his turmoil. Suddenly, a breathless knock shattered the quiet. A messenger, robes dusted with desert sands, hastily entered, bowing deeply before delivering a sealed envelope, stamped with a symbol that made his blood run cold. He broke the wax seal with shaking hands, eyes scanning the words that sent a jolt through every fiber of his being. The letter spoke clearly of a conspiracy, a ripple threatening to drown the fragile bonds born from defiance and attraction. Names once trusted and faces long forgotten now emerged like ghosts from a forgotten past. The lines blurred between friend and foe, truth and deception. He folded the letter slowly, the weight of impending war pressing down on him. Turning to the vast window, he gazed out once more at the desert horizon, where night had swallowed the last embers of dusk. Somewhere, in the depths of that endless expanse, the secrets they both sought to hide waited, looming like an unforgiving storm. His voice barely a whisper, he vowed, "No matter the cost, I will uncover the truth." But just as the air seemed to still, a shadow moved silently in the darkness outside the palace walls, a silent witness to the fragile empire of secrets and passion about to shatter. The moon hung low and heavy over the emirate, casting a silver glaze across the ornate marble floors of the palace. The vast hall, usually alive with the whispers of power and wealth, now held a suffocating silence, broken only by the measured steps of the billionaire sheikh as he paced restlessly. His mind was a battlefield, torn between loyalty to his bloodline and the stirring of something far more volatile: trust, and perhaps unexpectedly, desire. The sealed envelope still rested on the golden table, its message far from deciphered in his heart. Names intertwined with betrayal, faces he once called friend, now lurking as shadows of deception. Every secret clawed mercilessly at the fragile hope he had begun to nurture. And at its center stood the woman who dared to defy him, the landowner's daughter, whose fierce eyes burned with truths he was only beginning to fathom. Her presence lingered in the air like the scent of jasmine and oud that filled the palace corridors. He could still hear her voice, steady and unyielding, challenging the iron grip he'd wrapped around his life. She was no mere subject to be commanded. She was a force of nature, storm and flame intertwined. Summoning his will, he strode toward the private courtyard, where date palms swayed softly under the desert's cool night breeze. There, amid the delicate fountains whose waters sang softly, he found her waiting, a silhouette framed by the cascading light of lanterns. Her eyes met his without hesitation, holding a courage as fierce as the desert sun. "You summoned me," she said, her voice a mix of defiance and wary invitation. His gaze bore into her. And yet, each revelation pulls us deeper into a web none of us intended. She stepped closer, the hem of her silken dress whispering secrets. "You hide behind your crown, Sheikh, but I too bear chains. Chains forged by the sins of those who came before us." For a moment, the gulf between their worlds seemed to narrow, bridged by shared burdens and unspoken pain. His pride warred with the raw ache of empathy, a tension written in the set of his jaw, the flicker in his eyes. "Tell me," he demanded, voice low, "what is this conspiracy that seeks to destroy not just my legacy, but the fragile trust between us?" Her breath hitched, a crack in her otherwise steady facade. "It begins with your most trusted advisors, men who wear loyalty like a mask, but whose hearts thirst for power. They fear what you might lose, especially if you choose to see the truth in me." He frowned, the weight of her words sinking like stones. Throughout his reign, betrayal had curled in shadows, but never this deep, this close. He had fought wars with swords and allies. Now he confronted wars born of whispered secrets and fractured loyalties. The sheikh's hand tightened around a brass lamp, its warmth seeping into his skin, yet doing nothing to quell the chill settling in his bones. "Why should I trust you?" he asked, each word a challenge meant to penetrate the veil she wore so expertly. Her amber eyes shone with fierce honesty. "Because I too am hunted, not only by those who betrayed us, but by the weight of a past I cannot escape." An uneasy silence settled. The sounds of the night, the distant howl of wind against fortress walls, the gentle splashing of water, seemed to pulse with the heartbeat of their unspoken truths. Suddenly, a cloaked figure slipped from the shadows at the edge of the courtyard. Startled, the sheikh instinctively stepped between the stranger and the woman. The figure bowed low, voice barely audible. "Your Highness, urgent news from the eastern borders." His eyes narrowed, the lines of command etching deeper. "Speak. The caravan, it has been attacked. Nothing remains but ashes and silence." A cold dread seized him, sharper than the desert chill. The eastern borders were the first line of defense against enemies old and new. This was no chance raid. It reeked of strategy and revenge. The woman's hand brushed against his sleeve, steadying him against the rising tide of panic. Together, they stood, two souls bound by the storm unfolding around them. The sheikh's voice dropped to a harsh whisper. "This is only the beginning." She looked up at him, the flicker of fear masked by determination. If the enemies outside are ruthless, those within are more dangerous. His gaze locked on hers, a tempest of conflicted emotions raging beneath the surface. The promise of redemption wrestled with the shadow of betrayal. In that charged moment, the moonlight caught the glint of something the sheikh hadn't noticed before. A slender dagger, hidden beneath the hem of her cloak, its jeweled hilt whispering secrets of defense, of survival. His breath caught, not out of suspicion, but a sudden, fierce realization. She was ready to fight beside him, or perhaps even against him, whichever fate demanded. The desert stretched beyond the palace walls, vast and unforgiving, a land that bore witness to power, passion, and peril in equal measure. And now, under that endless expanse of stars, two hearts, each guarded by scars and secrets, poised on the brink of a war that threatened not only their lives, but the very soul of the empire. A distant horn sounded, slicing through the night like a blade. Somewhere far away, the tides of treachery began to surge, unstoppable and hungry. The billionaire sheikh tightened his fist, eyes burning with unyielding resolve. "No matter who strikes first," he murmured, voice like steel, forged in fire and ice. "This battle will end with only one truth standing." And deep within the shadows of the palace, eyes unseen watched back, calculating, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The first light of dawn seeped through the stained glass windows, painting the marble floors of the palace in hues of rose and gold. Yet in the private chamber where the billionaire sheikh lingered, the fragile serenity of morning was a cruel contrast to the tempest consuming his thoughts. He stood by the ornately carved window, fingers tracing invisible patterns on the glass as his gaze pierced the endless sweep of desert beyond. The news from the eastern borders weighed heavily on his mind. Ashes where caravans had once tread, silence where life had thrived. It was a message writ in fire. The war looming beyond his walls was no mere skirmish. It was the reckoning of secrets, a reckoning that would burn through blood and loyalty alike. Behind him, the soft rustle of silk announced her entrance. The landowner's daughter moved with quiet determination, eyes unwavering despite the shadows under them. Her presence filled the room, an ember amidst the cold marble and gilded detachment. She did not need to speak for her tension to be felt. He turned slowly, locking eyes with the woman who had become the reluctant centerpiece of his turbulent empire. "This is no longer just about us," he said, voice low. "Roughened by sleepless nights, they attack not only my lands, but the fragile trust we barely dared to build." Her gaze softened, a flicker of humility threading through the fierce pride he had come to both fear and cherish. "I feared this storm was coming. The same voices that tried to keep us apart now move to shatter everything." He stepped closer, every inch an imposing force shaped by years of rule and sacrifice. Yet beneath the polished veneer of power, his vulnerability throbbed, a raw wound revealed only to her. "You carry more than just inherited burdens," he murmured, voice threading with something unspoken. "The dagger at your side hides more than its gleam suggests." Her fingers brushed the hilt momentarily, a shadow of a smile flickering just beyond reach. "I am ready to fight," she said simply, "for a future that can be ours if only we dare to claim it." A sharp knock fractured the fragile moment. Both turned toward the door where a breathless messenger awaited. The scroll he bore was stamped with a seal that sent chills down the Sheikh's spine, the mark of a name thought buried in dust and betrayal. He broke the seal with deliberate calm, unfolding the fragile parchment. Eyes scanning, he devoured each word, as if survival depended on the secrets inked in faded script. "They move in the shadows of my closest counsel," he said grimly. "Those sworn to protect, now steering the daggers aimed at my back." The woman's gaze darkened, mirroring his storm. "Their greed is boundless. They fear a truth that might unravel. Their schemes." His jaw clenched, the taste of bitter iron thick on his tongue. To expose such treachery was to cast fire upon the golden throne itself. "Trust," he whispered, turning back to her, as the weight of his lineage pressed upon his shoulders like the desert sun. "It is the only thread holding this fragile realm together. Yet it is threadbare." She reached out, fingertips grazing his hand, a brief spark in the cold air. "Then let us weave new trust from the ashes, together." For a heartbeat, the world fell away, the palace, the desert, the ruthless game of power and past sins. In that suspended moment, they were not ruler and rebel, blood and burden, but two souls seeking to heal scars invisible to all but each other. Yet the stillness was shattered as distant voices echoed from the corridor, hurried footsteps slicing through the thick air. The chief steward entered, eyes wide with fear, clutching a second missive. His voice trembled. "Your Highness, news from the palace itself. A fire ravages the eastern wing. Guards report sightings of masked intruders." The Sheikh's breath hitched, muscles coiling with danger, flames within his sanctuary. Betrayal not confined to battlefields, but now raging at home. "No," he growled, every command burning in his words. "Secure the palace. Protect the women and children. No one enters or leaves without my say." The woman stepped beside him, resolute despite the chill creeping in her spine. "This is war, not only of swords and lies, but of flames and shadows." He looked down at her, the flicker of doubt and desire mingling in his dark eyes. "And in this war, can we truly trust the hearts beside us?" A sudden chilling wind rattled the tall windows, carrying whispers of schemes yet unseen. The palace, a fortress of marble and might, felt suddenly fragile, a gilded cage on the brink of shattering. From somewhere deep within the labyrinthine halls, a single candle flickered out, swallowed by encroaching darkness. His voice dropped to a vow, fierce and unyielding. No matter the enemies that circle us, within or without, I will uncover every hidden hand. Her fingers tightened around his, unspoken promises exchanged in that fraught silence. Just as certainty seemed to anchor them, the palace doors groaned ajar, unbidden and slow, revealing a shadowed figure standing bathed in moonlight, a gleam of steel catching the pale light. The billionaire Sheikh's eyes narrowed, heart pounding as the intruder stepped forward, and the dagger sheathed beside him whispered of destiny about to ignite. The battle for the soul of an empire was no longer a distant threat. It had arrived. The shadowed figure stepped forward, the glint of steel catching the moonlight as the heavy palace doors closed behind him with a final, ominous thud. The billionaire Sheikh's eyes narrowed, every muscle tensed beneath his embroidered robes. In that instant, the vastness of his empire seemed to shrink. The palace that once symbolized impenetrable power, feeling suddenly vulnerable and hollow. He did not speak, but the weight of his gaze bore down on the intruder like the desert sun in its fiercest hour. The woman beside him, the landowner's daughter, did not flinch. Instead, she refused to look away, her hand resting lightly on the hilt of the dagger she always carried, an unspoken declaration. She was ready to stand beside him, no matter the cost. "Who comes unbidden into my sanctuary?" The Sheikh's voice cracked through the silence, sharp and commanding. The figure dropped his hood, revealing a face etched with scars of battle and burden. A loyal captain from the eastern borders, his expression grim. "Your Highness, we bear news worse than flames or betrayal." The Sheikh's breath caught, heart hammering fiercely. "Speak." The caravan attack was no random act. It was a calculated strike, the captain said, voice low, eyes darting. "But there is more. A traitor moves among your closest allies, one who feeds information to our enemies, unraveling the threads of your rule." The room seemed to shrink further, its gilded walls closing in as the magnitude of the threat settled like a poison. The Sheikh's hands clenched into fists at his sides, knuckles bleaching white. Betrayal, not from distant foes, but from within the gilded cage of his own palace. He turned to the woman, the fire in his eyes raw and searching. This traitor, what name does shadow carry in their footsteps? Her lips pressed into a thin line. Whispers point to the chief steward, the man who first brought you the news of the fire. His allegiance has always been questionable, and his ambition dangerous. Doubt flickered across the Sheikh's face, quickly masked by cold resolve. "Then we must act decisively. Trust cannot survive if betrayal festers beneath the surface." Together they moved to the marble windows, overlooking the tranquil courtyard, bathed in silver light. There, the fragrance of jasmine mingled with the crisp desert breeze, a fragile peace soon to be shattered. "You stand with me, but I fear others will falter," he murmured, voice heavy with unspoken fear. Her eyes softened, though the fierce spirit within did not waver. "I do not falter, but trust must be earned, as must loyalty." A silence hung long between them, taut as a drawn bowstring, ready to release. Suddenly, from the shadows, a soft rustling shattered the quiet. The Sheikh's gaze swung sharply, but the woman held out a hand to still him. Her voice was barely above a whisper, yet it carried the weight of relentless storm. "Not all enemies wear swords. Some hide behind smiles and whispers." He exhaled slowly, the cool night air stinging his lungs. "I have built castles on loyalty, only to find sand beneath my feet." Her fingers brushed his arm in reassurance, sparking a fire that licked at the walls of his solitude. "Then hold fast, Sheikh. Together, we will find the roots of this poison and uproot it before it devours us all." In that moment, beneath the tapestry of stars stretched across the desert sky, their fates intertwined like the ancient veins of gold in the palace walls. Fragile, yet unbreakable, the distant howling wind seemed to echo the promise of coming war, carrying with it the scent of smoke and fear. But even as they braced for the storm, neither noticed the slight movement near the grand entrance, a silent shadow that slipped away as though swallowed whole by the night. The next morning dawned, the palace aglow with hesitant light, but the atmosphere brimmed with a chilling tension. Servants hurried through corridors with whispered urgency. Guards exchanged knowing glances behind their steadfast masks. In the private chamber, the Sheikh and the woman convened once more, plans laid bare on velvet-covered tables, sparkling with jewels and dust. Maps, letters, and coded messages bore witness to the growing menace. His gaze lingered longer on her than on any document. The defiance in her eyes promised a ferocity that could match the desert's harshness. "You have a past shrouded in secrets," he said quietly. "But now it seems those secrets may be the key to our survival." She met his look steadily. "The darkness that haunts my family could either destroy us or bind us stronger." A sudden knock interrupted. The fragile alliance. A messenger, eyes wide with urgency, handed the Sheikh a sealed scroll bearing the emblem of a neighboring emirate, long estranged from his own, yet feared for its ambition. Breaking the seal, the Sheikh's eyes narrowed as he read the urgent warning. A coalition of enemies was forming, aimed at dethroning the opulent empire he ruled. The fighters at the eastern borders were just the opening salvo. He folded the letter with an iron grip as the room seemed to grow colder. "War is no longer a distant fear," he said, voice low but fiercely resolute. "It creeps closer, masking itself in shadows and lies." The woman stepped to his side, her silhouette strong against the morning haze filtering through the lattice windows. "Then we prepare, not just to defend lands, but the fragile trust between us." For a fleeting moment, the palace walls felt less like a prison and more like a fortress, fortified by unexpected alliance and unspoken hope. But as the sun climbed higher, a servant burst through the doors, pale and breathless. His voice trembled with dread. "Your Highness, a message from the desert itself. There's been a betrayal at the oasis." The Sheikh's world narrowed to a pinpoint of light and shadow, heart pounding with the weight of decisions he dared not delay. "Gather the council," he commanded, voice steel. "Every secret must be laid bare, every ally tested, because the storm is upon us, and only truth can weather it." Outside, the endless desert shimmered in the heat, its dunes hiding dangers unseen. And within the heart of the palace, beneath layered silks and cold gold, a new and deadly game began, one where love and betrayal would collide with the fury of the desert winds. Far from the glittering halls and silent whispers, a figure cloaked in midnight approached the oasis, where the first cracks in loyalty had already formed. In his hand, a small, folded piece of parchment, a secret that could change everything. The breeze carried the faintest whisper, almost lost to the endless desert night. The game had only just begun. The night deepened, casting long shadows across the palace halls, where secrets lurked like venom, waiting to strike. The billionaire sheikh stood by the great window, his silhouette stark against the moonlit dunes. His dark eyes, once impervious, now carried the weight of storm clouds, thunder brewing in silence. The letter from the neighboring emirate had settled heavily in his thoughts, a coalition of enemies, masked by false smiles and broken trusts, threatened to drown the fragile peace he dared to nurture with the landowner's daughter. Behind him, the soft rustle of silk announced her arrival. She stepped into the room, each movement measured and resolute, the jeweled dagger at her side glittering faintly under the chandelier's glow. Her presence was a flame against the cold marble, unwavering despite the growing tempest. "More news?" he asked, voice rough but steady. She nodded, eyes sharp with resolve. Whispers grow louder within the palace walls. The chief steward's loyalty is now suspect. His name comes entwined with those plotting against you. A subtle flicker of pain crossed his face. The one he had guarded his secrets with might be the one. Serpent at his back. Yet the woman's fierce gaze sparked something he fought to hold on to, a tether to hope amid the encroaching dark. "Then we act," he declared, voice low. "Trust is a fragile weapon. We must wield it carefully, yet decisively." She stepped forward, her hand brushing his arm briefly, a touch neither cold nor warm, but charged with unspoken promises and battles yet to come. "And what of the others? Allies who may hide in shadows?" His jaw tightened. Every heart must be tested. Every brother and sister in this realm comes under scrutiny. The palace can no longer be trusted as a sanctuary. Silence fell between them, thickened by the scent of night-blooming jasmine that wafted faintly from the open windows. Beyond the palace, the desert's vastness carried a cold wind, as if warning of the chaos gathering like dark clouds on the horizon. Suddenly, a muffled commotion echoed from the corridors. The sheikh's hand instinctively moved to the hilt of his dagger. The woman mirrored him, eyes narrowing, every muscle taut. A breathless servant stumbled through the marble archway, voice trembling. "Your Highness, there's been movement near the eastern gate. A small group seen fleeing into the desert." The sheikh's eyes snapped to the distant horizon, where moonlight caught the shifting sands. "Intruders," he concluded grimly, "testing our defenses, probing our walls." The woman's gaze hardened. "They seek a weakness, a crack in the armor. His mind raced through the possibilities. Was it the coalition making its first move, or something even darker? Perhaps the traitor within had unleashed this attack as a message, a spark meant to ignite. The powder keg beneath his feet. He turned back to her, voice low yet commanding. We must tighten our grip, every guard doubled, every passage secured. Her lips curled into a fierce smile, tempered by the knowledge of what lay ahead. And together we will face whatever comes. The hour grew late, the palace descending into restless shadows. Yet the air between them vibrated, not with fear, but with the collision of wills drawn together by fate and fire. Later, as the moon climbed higher, the Sheikh moved alone through the labyrinthine corridors of his ancestral home. The golden lanterns cast fractured light over intricate mosaics and towering arches. In every echoed footstep, he felt the weight of decisions crushing down like the desert sun at noon. He paused at a massive carved door leading to the family archives, vaults of secrets bound in leather and gold-threaded bindings. Behind them lay truths forgotten and curses waiting to be remembered. His fingers trembled briefly as he lifted the iron handle, a sudden chill prickling down his spine. The letter about debts and betrayals haunted him still. He wasn't alone. A whisper, a breath, broke the stillness. He whirled, heart hammering, to find the woman's silhouette emerging from the shadows, eyes bright but unreadable. You should not walk these halls alone, she warned softly, the quiet strength in her voice an anchor to his tempest. I fear no ghost more than the ones we carry within, he replied, voice heavy with unspoken pain. She stepped closer, the air between them, charged with tension both fragile and fierce. Then let us face them, ghosts, enemies, the sins that bind us. Their hands met briefly, a flash of heat in the cool night. Suddenly, a sharp crack shattered the fragile calm. A distant explosion near the eastern gate. Dust and smoke billowed, staining the night sky with a suffocating veil. The Sheikh's eyes narrowed with ferocity. They have crossed the first line. This battle will not be won with swords alone, but with every secret we dare to expose. She nodded, her gaze unwavering, despite the danger unfolding. Then we begin. Tonight, loyalty will be tested in flames. Together they moved swiftly, the opulence of the palace melting into shadows as power and peril entwined. The landowner's daughter and the billionaire sheikh stood side by side, not just ruler and rebel, but two souls bound by fire and fate. And as they vanished into the chaos, storming through their walls, a cold, unseen figure watched from the highest tower, a smile curling beneath a veil of darkness. In the end, the whisper echoed through the night, all empires fall for love or betrayal. The desert stretched silent once more, but beneath its endless sands, the true battle was just awakening. The moon cast a pale, silvery light over the palace, its grandeur feeling suddenly fragile beneath the weight of looming betrayals. The billionaire sheikh stood motionless, eyes fixed on the distant desert horizon, where shadows seemed to stretch deeper into the night. The letter from the neighboring emirate lay heavy in his thoughts, a quiet storm stirring beneath his calm facade. Behind him, the soft echo of silk whispered through the chamber, as she appeared, her presence steady, fierce even in the threat that shadowed them both. The jeweled dagger at her side caught a stray gleam, a reminder of the battles, both spoken and silent, that awaited. His voice broke the stillness, low and taut with restrained power. The chief steward, the man we once trusted most, he carries betrayal like a cloak. But how deep does the poison run? Her gaze sharpened, unwavering. Deeper than you fear. The flames that burned the eastern wing were no accident. They were a signal, a warning to you. And to me. He inhaled the scent of night-blooming jasmine drifting through the open window, a cruel contrast to the fire threatening to consume everything within these walls. The palace, this kingdom of marble and gold, now felt like a cage tightening around his heart. We've built walls of loyalty, yet the cracks have spread unseen beneath our feet. She stepped forward, each movement intentional, the silk of her dress whispering secrets along the marble floor. And yet, loyalty can be reclaimed, forged anew from the ashes of betrayal. Her words struck a chord buried deep inside him, a fragile hope flowering amidst the ruin. He turned to face her fully, the tension between them electric, equal parts defiance and unspoken yearning. "Do you trust me?" he whispered, the question raw and almost vulnerable. She met his eyes without hesitation. "I trust what we can build together. But you must know, the enemies within are cunning. They weave lies that could unravel us faster than any sword." A heavy silence swallowed their shared breath as a sudden clatter shattered the quiet. The palace doors burst open, and a breathless servant stumbled in, face pale, eyes wide with panic. "Your Highness," he gasped. "Masked figures have infiltrated the eastern wing. Guards were captured or slain, and worse, another message was left behind." The Sheikh's gaze hardened, muscles coiling like a predator poised to strike. "Bring it forth." The servant produced a blackened scroll, edges singed and stained. Unfolding it, the Sheikh's eyes scanned the message, each word a dagger's thrust. "Your time runs thin. The throne will crumble by dawn. Trust no shadow." His jaw clenched with bitter resolve. The warning was clear. The traitor was not just a whisper in the hallways. He was a tempest gathering strength, poised to tear down every fortress of power the Sheikh had so relentlessly built. The woman stepped beside him, her hand brushing his sleeve, a quiet touch that spoke of unity. "In the face of encroaching darkness, they seek to fracture us at the core," she said, voice steady but laden with fierce determination. "But we still hold the advantage, knowledge, and loyalty born not of fear, but choice." He allowed himself a fleeting glance at her, that fierce flame who had dared to break through his gilded isolation. Her strength was no longer a threat, it was a beacon. "Then we move quickly. The council must be gathered. Every soul in this palace is suspect until proven otherwise." Her amber eyes narrowed. "And what of those who hide behind smiles? Who whisper allegiance only to stab in the dark?" He stepped toward the window once more, the cold desert air brushing past him like a ghost. "They will find that even shadows can be cut away by the sharpest blade." The night deepened, the stars above seeming to pulse with the rhythm of a war both within and beyond the palace walls. Suddenly, a sharp clang echoed from the far corridor. The alarm bell. Guards shouted orders. Footsteps thundered through the halls. A new dread settled like ice, tightening its grip. The battle was no longer a distant threat. It was upon them, hungry and merciless. The sheikh grasped her hand, the strength in that hold, a lifeline against the swirling chaos. Together, he vowed, we will face this storm. Not just to protect our empire, but to protect what we've begun to believe in. Her nod was fierce, unyielding. To the end. As they moved toward the heart of the palace, the flickering torchlight casting long, sharp shadows on the walls. Neither noticed the silent figure slipping unnoticed through the northern passage, a cloak drawn tight against the night, eyes burning with cold intent. The traitor had made his move, and the game of power, passion, and peril had only just begun. The first blade would not fall in battle, but in trust betrayed. And somewhere deep within the labyrinth of corridors, a whisper carried on the desert wind. The empire was about to shatter, and no one would be left untouched. The night air was thick with tension as the Billionaire Sheikh and the Landowner's daughter moved purposefully through the marble corridors, their footsteps echoing like distant thunder in the vast palace. Glass lanterns hung from vaulted ceilings, casting fractured pools of light that danced across intricate mosaics and gilded arches, their calm glitter a mocking contrast to the storm surging between them. He stopped abruptly before the ornate doors of the council chamber. Ebony carved with ancient symbols that had witnessed generations of rule. The sealed scroll still burned in his pocket, its weight pressing down like a promise he dared not break. The traitor's words, the warning in charred ink, had shattered the fragile peace they fought to protect. Behind swelling suspicion and whispered betrayal, a darker game unfolded. Are you certain the chief steward's hand guides this betrayal? The sheikh asked, his voice low, barely his own, beneath the crushing weight of doubt. Her amber eyes, fierce and unwavering even in the flickering shadows, held his gaze. All signs point to him. His alibis crumble, and the whispers in the halls grow louder. But it is not alone. It is a council poisoned by greed and fear. The words cut deeper than a blade. The realization that those he had once called brothers now wore masks of treachery twisted inside him, pulling at every strand of loyalty left untorn. He exhaled slowly, the scent of jasmine lingering faintly in the heavy air. This betrayal is not merely political, it is personal. His eyes darkened. They seek to unseat not only my throne, but to shatter the trust between us. She stepped closer, the silken skirt of her dress brushing the marble floor softly. They fear that our union, our trust, however fragile, is a threat. A flicker of vulnerability crossed her features before a spark of defiance reignited. They fear the power that lies in unity, something they can never control. A bitter smile curved the sheikh's lips, brief and laced with agony. Then we will give them cause to fear. Together they entered the chamber, where heavy velvet drapes muffled the distant sounds of a palace alive in unrest. The air smelled faintly of musk and amber, a heady mixture that seemed to thicken the atmosphere with impending conflict. Around the table, faces once familiar now appeared strangers, cloaked in shadows of suspicion. The chief steward sat poised, a serene mask belying the storm of ambition behind calculating eyes. His presence alone set the hall abuzz with silent accusations. "Your presence is expected," the Sheikh's voice rang out sharp, commanding. "But trust is earned, not given freely in times like these." The room stiffened. The steward's smile held none of warmth. "My loyalty has always been with the emirate, Your Highness." A subtle glance passed between the sheikh and the landowner's daughter. They knew the truth lay buried beneath veils of falsehood. Suddenly, a distant clamor rose outside, guards shouting, the clatter of armored footsteps racing down corridors. The woman's dark gaze met the sheikh's, tension crackling between them like flint and tinder. "They move against us now, from without and within." The sheikh rose, regal and resolute, eyes blazing with unfathomable depths of will. "Then let those who choose betrayal know this: there is no sanctuary in shadows." He commanded the guards to secure every gate, every passageway now vulnerable to blades and whispers alike. Each footstep beyond the palace walls felt heavy with doom. As the council erupted into strained accusations and veiled threats, the sheikh's thoughts drifted sharply to her, the woman whose fire had thawed ice around his heart, yet who carried a past as tangled and dangerous as the desert nights. She approached quietly, a hand on his arm grounding him amidst tides of doubt. His pulse quickened, the conflict inside him raging fiercer than all armies combined. "Whatever the cost," she murmured, voice steady, "I stand with you." His fingers tightened around hers, the brief contact a balm, fragile, fierce, undeniable. A sudden silence fell as the heavy doors of the chamber creaked open, admitting a breathless messenger bearing 2 scrolls sealed in black wax. The young man's eyes flickered nervously between the wary guards and the height of command waiting with bated breath. "One from the desert outposts, Your Highness," he said hurriedly, "another from the northern borders." The sheikh broke the first seal, eyes scanning rapidly. The first missive bore grim tidings of further attacks. Fires ignited in caravan camps, supply lines severed, loyalties shattered beneath the burning sun. The second carried darker warning, names of conspirators entwined not only in palace betrayal, but in rival emirates poised to strike. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. The net was tightening. He folded the parchment slowly, gaze drifting to the woman beside him. The flicker of determination mirrored in her steady eyes offered both comfort and challenge. "Where do we begin?" she asked softly, a warrior poised behind a delicate facade. He inhaled deeply, the scent of oud curling through the air like smoke from a distant fire. "By uncovering the poison at the roots," he declared finally. "Trust will be the blade that cuts away the rot." Their eyes met, fierce, unbowed, united. But as the palace walls seemed to brace against the quiet fury gathering beyond, a sudden, chilling whisper curled through the night air, a secret untamed, a shadow slipping silently through the corridors. Somewhere, deep within the heart of the empire, a hidden hand reached toward a fatal conspiracy. And as the moon sank lower, the Sheikh's world tilted on the edge of a knife. A solitary message, carried on the desert wind, whispered one cruel truth. The greatest betrayal was yet to come, and it would not be the enemy outside who struck first, but the one closest to his heart. The first rays of dawn spilled over the horizon, painting the sky in soft hues of pink and gold. The vast emirate, once shrouded in shadows of betrayal and fear, now seemed to breathe anew beneath the tender light. Within the grand palace, the atmosphere was thick, with a silence pregnant with hope and resolution. The billionaire Sheikh stood on the terrace, where he had once gazed out alone. His posture now transformed, not with the cold rigidity of a ruler walled off from the world, but with the quiet strength of a man who had faced his deepest storms and emerged tempered by their flames. Beside him, the landowner's daughter, her eyes, reflecting the calm promise of morning, slipped her hands seamlessly into his. Their fingers intertwined like the merging of their destinies, once separate, now bound irrevocably. The palace behind them was awakening, but the tumult that had threatened to tear them apart felt distant, like echoes fading beyond the desert sands. The traitors who had hidden in the shadows, whispering poisoned words and kindling fires of destruction, had been unmasked. The chief steward, exposed through veiled conspiracies and undeniable evidence, had faced justice, not in rage, but with a measured hand that spoke of a new era, where deceit would no longer find refuge. Their alliance with trusted advisors, forged anew, the billionaire Sheikh had restored balance to his realm. Loyalty, once fractured, had been reforged with a purity born of truth and sacrifice. She looked up at him, the fierce spirit that had challenged his heart, still blazing gently beneath the serene surface. "The empire stands stronger for all we have endured," she whispered, voice soft yet unwavering. His eyes lingered on her, the woman who had been both his fiercest opponent and his greatest salvation. "You have changed me," he confessed quietly, "not through force or command, but through courage and truth. Together we have turned betrayal into a bond unbreakable." Outside, the gardens behind the palace bloomed as if in celebration, their vibrant colors a stark contrast to the harsh desert beyond. Jasmine and roses filled the air with their delicate fragrance, weaving through arches and wind chimes that sang lightly in the morning breeze. The oasis of life mirrored the fragile peace now settling in their hearts. The people of the emirate, sensing the shift from turmoil to hope, moved with a renewed spirit. Whispers of unity and restored faith had begun to circulate through the market squares and caravan routes, carrying with them the promise of better days. A gentle smile played at the Sheikh's lips as he watched a young child chase a butterfly among the fountains, a symbol that life, no matter how harsh, always finds a way to flourish. Returning to the palace's inner chambers, the Sheikh and the woman faced their closest counsel. There was no longer tension heavy in the air, only a shared recognition of the battles fought and won. Eyes met with trust, and voices carried encouragement for the future. At last, he spoke, his voice steady and warm. We are more than rulers. We are guardians of a legacy born not of gold alone, but of the hearts we choose to protect, and the truths we dare to embrace. She reached forward, placing her hand on his chest, over the steady beat of his heart. And in that heartbeat, we find our forever. Sun rose higher, casting golden light through the lattice windows. Their court rejoiced, celebrating not only the peace reclaimed, but the love kindled amid the sands. Night had once whispered threats of ruin, but now dawn sang a song of redemption. Together, the billionaire sheikh and the landowner's daughter stepped onto the balcony overlooking the desert. No longer isolated by walls or secrets, but united by a future they would build side by side. The desert wind carried away the last remnants of fear and doubt, replacing them with the gentle promise of new beginnings. In this empire forged by passion and valor, love had triumphed, steadfast, enduring, and unshakable. And beneath the endless expanse of sky, their story found its rest, a testament to the power of forgiveness, the courage to trust, and the boundless hope that forever blooms after the fiercest storms.